Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today was cut day for the 2025 UFL season. Yes, these teams have just released their huge amounts of cuts to bring their rosters down to 50, or in I think Renegade's case, a little bit under 50, essentially to make their final roster for the 2025 UFL season. We are a week and a day away from the 2025 season kicking off next Friday, which remember I will be doing a live play for that game. And so we finally have the cuts that are, well, kind of shocking, kind of not super shocking. Let me put it this way. A lot of people online have made this seem like these are the most shocking cuts ever. They're not as shocking as last year's cuts, but there are a couple of players that were really shocking to get released. So we'll talk about every single player that got cut. We're not going to go in depth. We're just going to kind of review all of them basic, just kind of a basic one, talk about a couple of the big name ones. So without further ado, let's get started with the Michigan Panthers. Now, we're going to be doing this in the order that this was all released, which this video is going to be coming out at the normal 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. This was going to come out like most breaking news videos whenever I finished the video, but San Antonio took like an hour and a half to get their cuts released compared to everyone else, so it's coming out regular scheduled time. Michigan Panthers have released running back Toa Tawa, wide receiver Gavin Holmes, wide receiver Fazione McClurge, offensive linemen, they've released 3 of them, Chidi Okiki, J.D. Duplain, James Walker III, defensive line, Keontae Shad, linebacker, Ryland Goforth, cornerback, Jamon Green, defensive back, Keontae Harden, safety, Corian Ballard, and punter, Simon Laria. I probably butchered a couple of those names. Now, the biggest shocker there is Keontae Shad. This was a huge shocker. Now, it's important to note that a lot of these players that got cut, well, not a lot of them, but some of these players that got cut were due to injury-related things. Essentially, with how the injured reserve works, if you're injured to, too little or too long of a time, it's better for the teams to just straight up cut you, which we'll get to a player later. Yeah, Keontae Shaw was a big shocker. This is somebody who had a lot of potential. He showed he was an incredible player with the Breakers in 2023. 2024 didn't do so well, but pretty much every roughneck, besides from Chris Odom and guys that got hurt, didn't do well. It's a big shocker. I was really looking forward to seeing him being paired up with Breland Speaks as a 1-2 punch that could potentially just dominate the pass rush in this league, but that was a big shocker. Now, Tawa getting cut, not super shocked. It was pretty much between him and McCreary for that, secondary running back behind Matt Colburn in terms of guys returning. Not too super shocked. Offensive line, not super shocked. Receivers, not too shocked about a lot of these moves at all, aside from the Shad one. I definitely could see, if you were to give me the list of all the players, these are guys that I wouldn't be too shocked, had you have told me this beforehand. So those are all the ones for the Michigan Panthers. But now moving on to the St. Louis Battlehawks, we get to the biggest shocker of Andy Isabella, which was the biggest shocker until another receiver. So yes, the Battlehawks did cut Andy Isabella, and another shocker was Jelani Baker, somebody who was picked in the college draft for them. Panthers also had it, and you'll see that a lot of these teams, they had 1 or 2 guys from the college draft that signed them that ended up getting cut, like Jelani Baker. Now, James Bostic also got released. Tight end, Kamari Averett. Offensive lineman, Eric Magwood and Teton Saltis. Then defensive line, Albert Huggins and Curtis Brooks. Edge rusher, Kamoko Ture. Linebacker, John Patrician. Defensive backs, D'Angelo Mandel and Kalen Kennedy. Then safeties, Avery Young and Dravon Askew Henry. So you had a few of these guys who were guys who have been here before, like Askew Henry and a few other defensive guys and linemen. But the big shocker is Andy Isabella. Now, this goes back to something I've talked about for really ever in spring football, and that's the fact that just because you have some sort of NFL pedigree does not guarantee you success at all. For some reason, there are people who seem to think that just because you were a top 3 round NFL pick, you're going to be really good in this league. That's not the case. The level of competition in the UFL is very different from the NFL and college. It's the whole point of why people argue, day in and day out about could the best UFL team beat the best college team. The best UFL team has guys who are professional grown athletes. Best college team has great younger players. Not everybody in a college team, even in Alabama, is going to make it to the NFL. So it's one of those things where this is its own unique sort of area of talent. And so just because you were a highly touted NFL player doesn't really mean anything. Look at Wayne Gallman versus Jacob Saylor's last season for the Battlehawks. In theory, the guy that was a 1,000-yard rusher in the NFL should have been the best player at that position. He wasn't. Robert Kimdichie versus Breland Speaks. Kimdichie was a higher draft pick. Didn't work out. Breland Speaks, top-tier player. So seeing Andy Isabella not make the roster isn't too shocking. Mims did make the roster, so one of those, second-round pick or second, I believe they're both second-round pick guys, made it. Not too shocking. So that's the Battlehawks. Now, the Birmingham Stallions, I mean, seriously, I don't think anyone really cares. It's Stallions, like, oh no, they cut somebody. But in terms of who got cut for them, wide receivers Joseph Ngata, receivers Tyron Johnson, tight end Marcus Baugh. Marcus Baugh kind of got really in that just probably the most predictable cut, just simply put, because they're not bringing 4 tight ends, and you have your new tight end, and you have 2 other guys who were both better than Baugh, Jordan Thomas and Jay Sternberger. Odd man out, gets screwed over, gets released. Offensive linemen, you still have Alex Akinbulu, Matt Farinick, Grant Miller, and then you have Demetrius Taylor on the defensive line, along with Kyle Phelps and Joshua Pryor. Then you have linebackers Jojo Domain and Elijah Sullivan. Neville Clark, defensive back. That was one of the bigger shockers of the releases for them. Then Juju Hughes and then Quantrez Knight as your safeties. Again, Neville Clark, probably the most shocking of those ones. Honestly, I think a lot of people were kind of shocked to see his name be popped up there. Marcus Baugh, not too shocked because you kind of get that odd man out. Receivers, this is one of those teams that has a lot of good receivers, getting cut the receiver position. Them, the Battlehawks, and the Renegades, because we'll get to the Renegades later, having a big name receiver get cut really isn't too shocking when, your entire room is big name receivers, you know what I mean? So, that's Birmingham. Now, then for Showboats, Dwayne McBride, that's somebody that a lot of people think can be really good in this league but didn't make the team. Dawood Davis. Yes, you heard that right. All UFL 2024 player Dawood Davis got cut. Now, I've heard some people say it was a scheme fit. I've heard some people say it was an injury-related thing. We'll see because, we'll see if he signs somewhere else. This is a big shocker. This was the biggest shock of all of them. Because, again, this is an all-UFL player who just got cut. Important note, he did get hurt during his time with the Panthers last year, Carolina Panthers in the NFL. He may have gotten hurt again. There's a lot of stuff going on. Again, a lot of players dealt with injuries. We'll get to a kicker for Houston that's dealing with that as well. Huge shock, so that's Dawood Davis. Now, receivers, aside from me, you have Joseph Skates, Kyle Sheets, and Sam Pinckney. Then you have tight end Jacob Warren. Offensive lineman, you have Ryan Johnson and Laka Uatafe. Defensive line, you have Brandon Matterson, edge Jalen Allen, and Miles McHaney. Linebacker Chris Russell, and defensive backs Ravarius Rivers and James Jones IV. They also put Nick Torres on IR. Again, Dawood Davis is the biggest shocker here. Look, them and the Roughnecks, right, they made a lot of roster overhaul. It's not too shocking to see a lot of guys that did get released on either team just because of the fact that, again, they brought in a lot of people, but Dawood Davis was a shocker. This was the one move where I would say, yeah, it rivals some of the big ones last year. Like when Boogie got cut pretty early last year. This is up there. Really shocking to see him get released. Interesting to see if it was because of injury, a scheme fit, if he signed somewhere else. Because, could you imagine him with Luis Perez? Oh, my God. Next, the Roughnecks. TJ Pledger, big shocker. Look, I just talked about in my running backs video. He was somebody who may not have had, the big touchdown stats, but he was a very solid running back when he was there, even being behind Mark Thompson. Shocking release. Rory Starkey, Felton Davis, and CJ Wyndham are a triple threat at receiver that got cut. Tight end Malcolm Epps. Then offensive line Ryan Pope, Isaiah Battle, and Sean Brown. Defensive line Christian Sokili and Cedric Wilcox II. Ben Davis at linebacker. Chu Ogbonna at defensive back, and Jack Corner at safety. Now, J.J. Molson, the whole thing is, essentially, he was hurt. Chris Blewett is their new kicker. So Chris Blewett is now there. He lost the battle in the Panthers training camp, so he is now the kicker for the Roughnecks. J.J. Molson is injured. Will he be back? I think that he's probably going to return, but of course it's going to matter of how good Chris Blewett is playing. So that's the big thing for there. Again, each of these teams, with Michigan, a lot of the players they released were new signings. Team like Houston, they released quite a few more of those old guys from the previous season. A couple of the linemen, TJ Pledger, of course. Some of these guys were there last year, and they're pretty much overhauling a lot of this roster. Not super shocked at these releases. Now, the Arlington Renegades, this has a couple of shocking ones as well. Now, running back Ike Arabar, wide receiver Brandon Arconido, not the biggest ones. Juwan Manigo, that's a shocker. A lot of people were really shocked at that. I, truth be known, wasn't. Because of what I said. This team has so many good receivers. You still have Javante Payton and Tyler Vaughns as two of your big threats, and that's not even all of them. It's not super shocking. Matt Cyber getting released, bit of a shock. Offensive line, Blake Larson, Griffin McDowell, Mark Evans II, and Spencer Rowland. You'll notice if you go look at their roster, again, you can go look at Thorne's Google Sheets with all their rosters fully up to date. They have just a couple of guys from last year, and like Garrett McGinn doesn't even really count because he was hurt. So they pretty much are like fully overhauling that offensive line, and a couple of these guys were with them last year. Not too shocking, like Bryson Mays and all that. Defensive line, Marquise Lawson Greenwood, Joey Asta, and Vincent DeLeo as your linebackers. Corners, Mekhi Garner and Vincent Gray. Brady Breeze at safety, and the other big shocker, defensive back Delonte Hood. One of the very few Renegades that played really well on defense. That was a shock. And I agree with that. That one was a shock. But talked about it before. This team has been overhauling their defense a lot. So maybe it's some sort of fit they want to do with this, make a new defense kind of deal. But this is somebody I do expect to sign somewhere else, barring he's retiring or is hurt. I would very much be in favor of the Panthers signing him, or just any team that needs a defensive back. And then we have the second to last team, the DC Defenders. The DC Defenders released a quadruple threat of wide receivers: Cornell Powell, Jacob Copeland, Joshua Matthews, and Lynn Bowden Jr. That was a big shock. He's somebody who's very versatile, and a lot of people really were looking forward to him. That was a shocker. Devin Asiasi got cut at tight end. Then DJ Fluker, a former first-round NFL draft pick, got cut. Again, proving that just because you're a first-round pick doesn't really mean anything. Granted, first-round pick a while ago, but still a former first-round pick. Then you had Badara Traore, John Yarbrough, center Charles Turner III, and then defensive line you had Rayshad Nichols and Quincy Roche. Linebacker Brandon Boyer Randall, corner Adam Sparks, and safeties Josh Proctor and Isaiah Johnson. They're now at 50 players, of course, one of those teams as well. Again, Larson points out Bowden, Roche, and Trier, but again, receiver position with Bowden especially, some of these versatile as him is shocking. This team had a lot of questions about their offense as a whole, right? Their running game, if Smith isn't back to being fully healthy or if he gets hurt again. Wide receivers weren't really great last year. You only brought back one of your two big threats there. So going to be very interesting to see there. Again, DC, these cuts, if anything, to me, make me feel even more, like, not to spoil if you haven't seen it, but I just put out my season predictions video. These cuts, this is one of the, pretty much the only team where I'm like seeing these cuts, I'm like, yeah, this kind of makes me really believe DC's not going to be great this year. That's just me. And then finally, the San Antonio Brahms, a team that made us wait an hour and a half for these. Now, this one was from Avian Plummer, and these are the cuts that they had. Alex Philstrom at center, Christian Young at safety, Derek Langford at corner, Jalen Gill at wide receiver, Jalen Harris at defensive end, Jalen Twyman at defensive tackle, John Morgan the third defensive end, Justin Shepard guard, Kalen Barnes corner, Marquand McCall at nose tackle, Ty Farfogel at wide receiver, Teron Hunt guard, and Zach McLeod outside linebacker. Biggest shock here to me was Twyman. This was someone who did get an NFL opportunity, came back, and is now gone. That was a shocker. Aside from that, not super shocking. Again, teams that I have faith in their coaching and their talent construction, like the Panthers, like the Stallions, like the Brahmas, I really couldn't care too much about the releases because I trust those teams to make the right decision. That's why the only one was really Shad being like, wow, that's shocking. Here, again, it's the Brahmas. I have faith they're going to put out a good team. It's just a matter of can they, get over having that awful schedule they have. But these cuts, none of these are really super shocking. So that'll do it. Again, this has been Tom Fox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Again, it's just my thoughts that this was really not a super shocking round of cuts. There weren't too many huge names that got released where I'm like, whoa, I can't believe they got released. I know some guys who are like in super deep and looking at every single college player are going to be like, wow, some of these guys are really shocking. I just don't buy that. A lot of these people I'm seeing on like the Discords for UFL and other stuff are talking about like guys who are third string running backs being like, I can't believe this guy made it over the other one. I don't know. I just feel like when you compare it from last year to this year, it's like that hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby. Last year's cuts had so many shocking cuts. Every team had at least like two really shocking ones. Now, was there one as shocking as David Davis by itself? Not really. But once you eliminate the Davis one, the most shocking ones, I understand them again. The Manigo release, I wasn't too shocked at. You had a great receiving core. Andy Isabella, not super shocked because I've never been super high on high NFL picks. I'll mention it because they have a lot of potential, but it's not a guarantee of success. But that's my thoughts. Again, make sure you subscribe to the bell, turn on. We're getting closer and closer to the season starting. Again, we're literally 8 days away, so we've got a lot of content coming out as there. Probably going to be like 3 full videos before the season starts because I'm probably going to do a video talking about some of the biggest changes from last year this season. So be on the lookout for that, my next Power Rankings video, as well as my game picks for next week. Again, I will be streaming the kickoff game, so be on the lookout for that. And as always, guys, have a great night.